We remember that the Roman armies, which met and turned back the first assault of Alaric in Italy, were made up of soldiers hastily called in from their posts along the historic line of the Rhine and Danube. Thus the frontier was left unguarded, and troop after troop of the barbarians came down pouring into the empire. We remember that the Roman armies, which met and turned back the first assault of Alaric in Italy, were made up of soldiers hastily called in from their posts all along the historic line of the Rhine and Danube. Thus the frontier was left unguarded, and troop after troop of the barbarians came now pouring into the empire. We cannot follow them all, but only such as founded states and thus helped in the making of modern Europe. Near the Goths along the Baltic shore, we first hear of the Vandals and can trace them with some certainty as they move by slow stages in a southeastern and the western course. At the time of the Battle of Adrianople, they were in Pannonia on the Danube, where they had long been stationed as faithful allies and defenders of the frontier. The example of Alaric set them in motion. They moved rapidly to the northwest, carrying along with them their kinsmen, the Suevi, and a strange, un-German nation, the Alani. They crossed the border again near Mayence, and made a long circuit through the north of Gaul, and then pressed steadily southward into Spain. Here we have already referred to them as those kinsmen who the Visigoths found and partially conquered in the name of Rome. Thus far the Vandals had not played a very prominent part. Where we hear of them fighting, they generally got the worst of it. But now, after the Visigoths had brought Spain into a comparatively peaceful condition, their great chance came. You will see by the map how easy it is to cross from Spain to Africa, so easy that no power has ever held the one without wanting the other as well. Africa was a very rich grain-producing country and was often called the granary of Rome because Italy was incapable of raising grain enough to feed itself. The plan which Alaric had failed to carry out was to be taken up by the Vandals of Spain. They are said to have been invited by a Roman officer out of revenge for some injury received from his government. That the invitation did not need to be very pressing, we may judge from the rest of the story. That before the Vandals had got very far on their journey, the officer repented and would gladly have stopped them, but found it was too late. The Vandals, under their greatest leader, Genseric, overran the provinces of Mauritania and Numidia and began the siege of the fortress of Hippo. While the siege was going on, St. Augustine, then an aged man, was at his post, writing his last work and comforting the multitude of other bishops who had flocked into the city from the desolated provinces. He died early in the siege. Hippo resisted valiantly, but was finally given up to Genseric by the Roman government on condition that he would stop where he was and make no further conquest of Africa. Of course, the promise was given and broken. Just 10 years from the time when they had left the shores of Spain, the Vandals entered Carthage and were thus masters of the whole African province. Almost at once we find this people, who for generations had not caught sight of the sea, becoming a people of sailors. Perhaps they were only going back to a mode of life which their ancestors had followed upon the shores of the Baltic. Again, after an interval of 600 years, Carthage became the capital of a great seafaring and fighting people. The Vandals became a race of bold and successful pirates, putting out in their light vessels and running up on the shores of Italy or Gaul or Greece, wherever they saw a chance for plunder. The story goes that Geiserik, setting out on one of these expeditions, was asked by his pilot which way they should steer. Wherever there are people with whom God is angry, was the answer.